All right. Again, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I've got about 3 minutes past start time, so we've probably got everyone. We may have a few more joining us as we get started here. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a consultant working for NDOT that you see down in the corner, Nashville Department of Transportation, and we are on board to help administer this traffic calming program for the city. Appreciate you all taking your time to join us this evening. We're talking about two streets here. This is a little bit of a special edition for us. Two streets meaning two different projects, and that will become important here a little bit later as we look at the plans and all for these projects. Glen Road and Graybar Lane, both in the same area, both in the same council district. We thought it would be most efficient just to get together on here and look at both projects, and so we will do that. This meeting is being recorded. You may have seen a little message pop up here, and that's so that if you have a neighbor or someone that wasn't able to attend tonight, you think might have an interest in seeing the material that we're going to present, this recording will be available here in a couple of days, and you'll be able to access that through Metro's YouTube page. As we go through, I think you all have the ability to unmute yourself. We're a fairly small group, most of these meetings are, and so feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question or comment as we go along. That will be fine. Otherwise, I would ask that you keep it muted. It just tends to be a little cleaner that way. And also, I try to monitor the chat. Got that window up, so if you'd rather just type a comment or question, that's fine to do that too. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to try and cover about three major topics here tonight. One is an overview of the program and how these two streets got introduced into the program. Secondly, we're going to look at some of the tools we have available, but I'm going to really truncate that, and I'll tell you why when we get to that section of the program, and then or the meeting, and then lastly, we'll look, and probably most importantly, look at the very preliminary concepts that we have for these two streets, and really want to get your reaction to that and feedback on that. So that will get started. Traffic calming is becoming more and more known as we roll more projects out. I think people in Nashville are understanding more of what the program is and what we deliver. It is a residential street program, not intended for business areas, industrial areas, and those kinds of things, mainly because we recognize this speeding in neighborhoods is really a quality of life issue. It is safety as well. But we also know that this really affects you all day to day living on streets where we have a recognized dealing with speeding that is higher than what we would like to see. We do focus here on physical solutions as opposed to signage and things. We try to do this, but can't always make that work. But physical solutions, meaning like speed cushions and those types of things, have been shown to be very effective. And we do focus on speed reduction. That sounds obvious. That is as opposed to trying to push traffic somewhere else. Sometimes people will ask to be a part of the program because they just have too much traffic on the street. We can't do a lot about that usually, but we can usually have an impact on slowing the traffic that is there down. We recognize that this is not a standalone cure-all for some of the speeding issues. We try to work in partnership with education, people that are just making public service announcements and those types of things. NDOT is doing some of that as well. Enforcement's a big issue. We don't have a lot of control over that. We have no control over that and what MNPD does, but they certainly are aware of the program, supporters of the program, but we don't call in a lot of enforcement. That ability to make those requests is available, but as we all know, police are out there doing some very important work and having the resources and trying to prioritize traffic enforcement, not always the highest on their list, which is very understandable, but we do work in concert with them. Sorry, I just realized you couldn't see that, but that's the 3 E's. One of the things that we do like to point out, one of the reasons we have, or the department has emphasized this program, is because of the safety impacts of that. More and more we're seeing in our neighborhoods that our streets, our public right-of-ways are not just places to drive, but we've got probably more pedestrians than ever, more bicycling activity and those types of things. And it stands to reason that, the slower traffic goes, the better the safety outcomes. But this graph, I think, really speaks to some of the safety aspects, particularly pertaining to pedestrian activity on our streets. And if we can slow traffic down in the unfortunate event, if there is a pedestrian vehicle conflict, that pedestrian has a much better chance of surviving that event if traffic is moving at a slower speed. This continues to be a very high demand program for Metro. When you all were both of these streets came into the program back in the summer, and at that time, when you all made applications, there's still over 500 streets just like yours requesting this attention from this program. That's not to say how lucky you are, because I'm going to show you in a minute. You kind of have to be at the high on a bad list of speeding, but it is to say you're not alone in this. We have these issues in all types of neighborhoods all over the county, and it seems to be getting more and more. We can tackle that backlog at a rate generally of about 50 projects a year. Back in the summer, though, there was some surplus funding that council saw fit to allocate additional dollars to. So right now we're working with one of our largest cohorts of neighborhood projects, 85. And so we've just got a lot of projects coming through our system right now. That just means things are going to be a little bit slower, but we do neighborhood meetings like this and just try to keep that backlog manageable. One of the things we always like to plug is Hub Nashville. If you're not familiar with this, it's a great resource for residents of the county. Hub.Nashville.gov. You can also just call 311. And the reason we show this is sometimes when people get into the traffic calming program, what they're really asking for is maybe more stop signs or crosswalks because of pedestrian issues or something like that. And those are all fine requests. And we certainly understand the congruence with traffic calming. However, we just don't have some of those tools at our disposal in this program. That's not to say you can't access them, and the way you access those is through Hub Nashville. It's a great place to initiate any type of a request for Metro government, not just NDOT, but pretty much any Metro department is represented there. So check that out if you haven't. It's a good place to go, and that does kind of a clearinghouse for all those requests, and a place that's officially logged and so forth. But a little bit about how we pick these projects. So if we've got 500 applications in, we've got to go through that and pick the ones that we're going to work on. And this is how we do it. When the application comes in, we begin collecting data. And so really all the time we're collecting data on our streets. And so 70% of the score to what gets you in the traffic calming program comes from data that you probably would expect that it comes from. We look at the speed of the cars on the street, and we look at the traffic volume, how many cars or how much traffic is on the street in a 24-hour period. The other 30% comes from some of these non-driver aspects that we were talking about earlier. For instance, if you have sidewalks, which I know Glen Echo does, that actually lowers your score with the philosophy being, well, cars may be going fast, but at least people have somewhere to walk. If you are have trip destinations, if you're close to parks or schools or shopping opportunities, things like that, your score goes up. And then also if there is a documented conflict, pedestrian crash, your score goes up as well. So we take all of that data, make a composite score out of it, and essentially just rank the projects that have been requested. The ones that come out on top win, and that means that's not always a good thing. That's not really congratulations. It just means you're toward the top of the list, and hopefully we can give some assistance in that. So some of that data specific to these two streets is here. Glen Echo is a little bit of a different street, and that's going to come to bear when we show you the thoughts we have on it. The 85th percentile speed, which is just a statistical way we look at the speed, is 37. It's a 30-mile-an-hour posted speed. On the high side, for sure. We certainly have streets that are faster than that, but 37 is pretty high speed there in terms of what we look at in this program. But the thing that's really important to us is the next one, the traffic volume. It's a little over 5,800 cars a day. And that becomes important because there are certain tools that kind of fall off the list that are not eligible at anything over 5,000 cars a day. Glen Echo Road is classified by the planning department as a collector. Y'all are probably familiar with that. It's just saying it's a little bit of a higher volume road. Those usually are a little bit higher speed road. That's the reason why it has not been included in some of the speed limit reductions that you may be familiar with all across the county. And so that means we can't do things like speed cushions on this street. The width is not as important because of that. It becomes more important when we're talking about some of the other aspects of traffic calming, but it is 28 feet wide, a little bit of a different cross section. It's got a bike lane in one direction, but not the other. And then the segment that we're looking at is about half a mile long. We'll look at each of these projects in more detail on a map here in just a second. And then Graybar, the limits that have been requested is from Hillsborough Road to Hopkins Street, and we're going to revisit that again here in just a minute as well. But the data that we have for that section, 34 miles an hour, so a little bit slower. The volume there, a little over 3,200 cars a day. Again, probably a little bit above average for most of the streets that we work on, but certainly well within our threshold of 5,000. So tools are kind of on the table for Graybar. And the street width there varies some, even within this short quarter of a mile section that we're talking about, from 18 to about 21 feet wide. Here are these two projects on a map, and hopefully you can be close enough to your computer screens. You can see these street names and all. But the little green line at the top there is our Graybar project. 431 is Hillsborough Road, and goes there to Hopkins Street, which is not labeled on this map. Which, by the way, is an interactive map that NDOT makes available. So you can go to their webpage and you can find a link to this, and that lets you look all around. I'll tell you why that's important. But just below the Graybar project, you see the Glen Echo project from Benham over to Belmont. Again, those were the limits requested in the application. I think the Benham project, probably because that's sort of where the neighborhood begins. It becomes, of course, you got Hillsborough High School, and then it becomes pretty commercial, as y'all are aware, from there over to Hillsborough. So that it just sort of ends there. And then the Hopkins one we can talk about. My hunch is there's been some new development in that area, and I know there's been some discussion about people crossing Graybar there to get back and forth between the library and the little park there. So talk about that one as well. The reason why this is an interactive map and we like to show this is because it may give you some other insight as we go through this process. The green lines there just mean that there is a project that has been identified and we are currently working on. It's not complete yet. So you see others close to you. Valley Brook is one of those, Cross Creek, both those on the other side of Hillsborough Road, and you'll find others in the area as well. The purple lines that you see there mean that a street has been applied for but not yet selected, and so that may be helpful if you're contemplating, an application or just wonder what the future holds for traffic calming potential on any of these streets. You can see if there's been an application put in on those, and then the blue ones, usually they're dashed, indicates that there is a traffic calming project that has been implemented, and that might be important if you want to go and drive on speed cushions and see what those feel like, and and your thoughts about them. I'm pretty sure the little blue one that you see down at the bottom, kind of upside down L-shaped blue project, is Oriole Place, which you're probably familiar with. Feeds into Richard Jones Road there. That has had speed cushions on it for maybe a year and a half, something like that. Probably the closest one to you. So this is the toolkit, and again, I'm going to go through this really quickly, and then we can come back if there's any questions. But speed cushions are really the bread and butter of our program. That's what most people probably anticipate when they put in an application for traffic calming, and it's what we do on 95+%, probably more than that. Probably, I mean, it's very close to 100% of our projects currently that we're doing are speed cushion based. You're probably familiar with these. It's a manufactured product. It's the same on every project that we do, and very consistent, very effective. They hold up well. We have some design considerations. We can space them out and structure them as we need to. So it's been a good product for us, and I think it's a product that's pretty high in demand on streets where we have some of these speeding issues. A close cousin to it is a speed table, essentially the same product, same material, just comes in a bit of a different configuration. The reason why we use cushions almost exclusively and rarely use tables is because of the emergency emergency response vehicle aspect. You see the gaps in the cushions here allow wider wheelbase vehicles like fire trucks and ambulances to have a little bit lesser impact when they're trying to get to where they need to go. So whereas the speed table is a one solid piece and doesn't provide that. So we really lean toward the cushions. We do have some before and after data, but it's pretty self-explanatory. If you've been out on those, you probably see traffic is slower, but we do continue to collect that. And the other one I do want to show you is the feedback sign. This kind of falls a little bit into the area of education that we talked about earlier. And it does what it says. And you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with these too. Overhill's had one for a long time, and we're beginning to see more of them in the county. This is one of the main tools that we use when speed cushions are not viable, like in the case of Glen Echo, where we got too much traffic to put the speed cushions down. We'll often base the plan on feedback signs. But they do what they say. They give you your speed back to the driver, just to reinforce that message to drivers who, may not realize that what the speed limit is, or they're exceeding it, or whatever. And so we do have some before and after data. Shows that at least initially a really good result. We're still collecting some of that to see how that holds up over time. But the nice part is it's not a very intrusive type of a countermeasure there. Occasionally we'll do narrowing, so we have that using some pavement markings. In more urban areas, we might use bulb out chicanes that are chicanes, especially very rare. Bulb outs sometimes where we have very wide intersections and need to try and calm those. And then one that we did for a while in Metro and really haven't done any in a few years, kind of continuing to evaluate those traffic circles. So those are the main tools that we have in our toolbox for this program. So let's look at your these two streets now. Start with Glen Echo here, and I've mentioned that we would not be putting speed cushions on this street, anything raised like that, and so this one becomes a radar sign based project, and so it's pretty simple. We think one pair of radar signs facing each direction of travel, roughly in the middle of the project, will probably give us our best result. Going back to what you're looking at here, I know it may look busy. There's kind of a lot on here, but on the far left-hand side is the project ending at Benham Avenue. You may see that label there, and then that's now the main entrance, or one of the main entrances there at Hillsborough. As you come back to the east, the stop signs there are at Hillmont. That's an always stop which is kind of in a way a good ending for the project or beginning for the project. It makes sense that, you know, traffic calming would begin or end at those stop signs like that. The fact that it just extends to Benham, you know, just I think it kind of defines again that school issue and the sort of the beginning of the neighborhood. And then as you continue on to the east where the traffic signal is, that's Belmont Boulevard right in front of some of Lipscomb's properties there. But the rest of that is, you know what it is. The radar feedback signs there are located right about the little detention pond that is there in front of the development. So we can vary that, but one of the things we're looking for is to make sure it's got, you know, good visibility of the sun and those solar panels can recharge in there, and that it's, you know, good distance from either of those ends of the project, so that we're trying to get good information back to the drivers. Let me stop there, and any of you who are more interested in the Glen Echo side, feel free to unmute yourself and let me know if you've got questions or concerns, or is this what you'd wanted to see, not what you'd wanted to see, things like that. Stop there for just a minute. I see a hand raised from someone with the initials JS. So yeah, there you go. No. Well, let's start. Keith, can you hear me? Can you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, I'll chime in. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you, Keith.
I'm right there on the corner of Hillmont and Glen Echo at the four-way stop. Disappointed to hear about the speed cushions, but I get it about the volume. This sounds good. I think it's a good spot. That little S curve gets pretty fast. People coming over the double yellow line right there a lot. So that seems like a good spot. So yeah, I like the idea. From the very beginning, I knew this was probably far-fetched and outside the scope of what you'd be willing to tackle, but is it crazy to think about a traffic circle at Hillmont and Glen Echo there? Because part of my complaint was it was the stop sign kind of sets up a place for people to punch it, you know, and gun it right there, and oftentimes some contention and honking as people are trying to figure out, you know, the stop signs there.
Yeah, no, it's not crazy. I mean, it's a good thought. One of the reasons that currently, I would say Metro is kind of cool on the idea of a lot of new traffic circles is two reasons. One is they take a huge amount of intersection. That intersection has to be really large for that to be developed in the middle of it, you know, and still have room for traffic to circulate around it. And that kind of brings up the second objection they have right now, which is they're not always the easiest to navigate. I can go back to the picture here, and you know, in spite of the little sign that's in the middle that tries to communicate how you're supposed to drive one of these things, there's always confusion. If I want to come to that intersection and I want to turn left, do I turn left in front of the circle? Do I go all the way around it like a roundabout, or just what? And different types of vehicles will actually drive it differently. So we've had some issues with our current traffic circles with school buses, for instance, that have a hard time kind of going all the way around. And so then you make special exceptions that they can drive in front of it. And it just gets to be, they haven't had a great experience from that aspect. And so they're still looking at some of the design things and things that they make a change. But I think the size of that intersection is going to be pretty limiting in terms of being able to fit something like this in any case. And then typically at an always stop, these are really more used for where you just have two sides that are approaching, and they may be kind of a yield condition. So you typically wouldn't use them as always stop. But I certainly hear what you're saying about it's kind of a launching takeoff point.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I was thinking about those small ones up there around Belmont, on 15th. And I like those little things, but I guess it didn't go over well. Anyway, I figured that was far-fetched. So thanks for the feedback. But yeah, this the radar signs, it would at least be something.
Yeah. And JS, I still see your hand. Are you able to unmute yourself? Let me see. I got something in the chat. Maybe I can read it here. Prefer not to have the driveway sign near my driveway. You got a bike sign there. Okay. East a bit. So pushing it east away from that pond. You know, this is a case where y'all can probably tell me better. I mean, we collect data at a spot and kind of know how fast traffic's going at one place, but you guys drive it every day, and you may have better insight about, you know, where people sort of reach top speed, as it were. We're also looking at visibility, you know, and so we can certainly take a look at moving it to the east or moving it away from that spot. And yes, if there's already signs there, especially something like a bike lane sign, those things can be moved. We're not going to double up and have, you know, like 3 signs all right on top of each other. And so ours may be moved because of that, or theirs may be moved because of that. When we show at this meeting, the level we're at tonight, when we show you this concept, just keep that in mind, that these things may always shift a little bit. I'd like to give you some idea for where we're thinking about it, but that's great feedback, and we will we'll take that into consideration. And if we really like this spot, you know, it's got great visibility. It seems to be where cars are picking up steam or whatever. Then yeah, maybe we keep that and we move some of the other signs out away from it, or kind of clear that out a little bit. One of the other things that we will try to do is also like group those maybe with a big utility pole or something, so we just don't have, you know, continued sign. Some people call it sign clutter. We'll try to minimize that as much as we can, and sort of gang those up where it makes sense. Thanks for the comment.
If I can chime back in, I agree they're speeding by the time they get to that point. I was thinking though, you can kind of look at it both ways. It's like if we want to prove and kind of show the driver you're this far over, too close to the ends before they pick up speed might not really illustrate the point that, hey, you're doing 45 here. But points taken certainly about the sign clutter in that area. But I do think it's through that S curve there that people pick up speed either coming down the hill, going eastbound, or they pick up speed on the straightaway going westbound before they head up that S curve up the hill. So I think you've got it where they're like at peak speed, but other considerations as well. And I apologize. I thought about one other thing that I wasn't sure if you guys would think about, but like those the little white sticks to separate off the bike lane to help people from encroaching and kind of curving their way around and using up the bike lane as well. Might be something that could be helpful.
Okay. We can certainly take a look at that. And you did mention that if people kind of cut those curves a little bit, you know, to flatten out the curve essentially and use the full width of that pavement, even if that means leaving their lane. So if you're seeing that may make some sense to use those. I will say, not everybody is a fan of those things. They do get hit. They, you know, it's okay. It just they don't stay looking brand new for very long. But you know, if they help people maintain their lane and especially slow down as they try to maintain their lane, certainly it's something worth looking at, and be glad to do that. That's a good point. And a comment about delivery truck. We can't do a lot about that. Asking them to please pull in a side street or in a driveway would be nice, but they just don't do that. We're aware. Yeah, I'm not sure what to tell you on that. All right. Anything else on Glen Echo? That's great feedback. We'll take a look at those things. Well, let's move to Graybar, but be glad to come back if we need to. So our project on Graybar runs from Hillsborough to Hopkins. And one of the other reasons I didn't want to spend a lot of time going through this is because we've had a very recent development that just came to my attention as I was preparing for this meeting a few days ago. And so I now understand this was the application that was put in. This goes back a few years. This one was put in. But I understand that during the summer application window, another application has gone in that extends this project from Hillsborough Road all the way down to Belmont Boulevard, which from our standpoint, just from a technical standpoint, makes a lot of sense. Because then, like we were talking about, you go from a stop at one end at Hillsborough Road to a stop at the other end at Belmont. And that's kind of the complete street, at least this part of Graybar. I know it continues on beyond that, but it makes some sense. As we call it a logical termini. It makes sense to treat the whole section of Graybar, or at least put it in front of people for their consideration. So the long and short of all of that is that we've talked to NDOT, told them what the issue is, so we got a new application. We're still collecting that data, so we don't know what it's going to say, but I think we're coming to the conclusion that what we probably ought to do, or at least suggest to you all that we do, is extend that project from Hopkins, where it is now, on to Belmont. What that means is we can talk about it tonight, but if we do that, we have not invited the rest of the street to this meeting, and we need to do that if it's going to be in front of their properties. And so what we would need to do then is just come back together. And I'm sorry if you're here to talk about it, and again, be glad to, but I don't want to waste your time. If people are kind of in agreement that seems like a good thing to do, we probably just need to reschedule. We don't need to reschedule a Glen Echo, but just need to reschedule with you so that we can be sure we get invitations out to the rest of the street and come back and talk about it. Let me stop with that. I'll be glad to go through what I'm showing here if you want to, but let me get some response back to extending the project. Is anybody here to talk about?
It's not my street, but since no one else is talking, I'll say that certainly makes sense to me. But not my street. So hopefully someone else will chime in.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Hammond, Steve Smale here, Graybar resident. Although this is interesting that you are showing this section. I was the contact email for Graybar Lane, but I'm about a mile or two down Graybar, which on your previous map was, I guess, a different application project. So I'm curious if Metro has multiple Graybar contacts, and if there's anyone on the call from Graybar in this particular section, because the Graybar application that I was a contact for is further down across Granny White.
Okay. Well, yes, they do have multiple projects, and let me go back. Bear with me. Yeah, I know there is another project that is down. Let me see. Go back to, if you could see it on this map. Yeah, I guess it's this other purple line on the other side of Granny White.
Right. Yeah, that's the one. That's about where I am, and there may be other people on the call from that purple section too. But the email went out to me that this was a Graybar, and I just assumed it was. Well, actually, I assumed it was all of Graybar, but we're on the purple section, so I guess that's probably a different meeting, a different study. But since we're all here, I think the residents of both Glen Echo and Graybar kind of suffer from traffic in the same sort of situation that oftentimes when Woodmont gets backed up, Graybar and Glen Echo are often used as kind of alternative routes. And so we get folks impatiently avoiding Woodmont. But I would encourage you guys to not just do the short quarter-mile study section that you've already done and extend down to Belmont, but Graybar end to end looks like it might be ripe for a full study, considerably longer than Glen Echo, but our streets are related as kind of cut-through streets.
Yeah, sure. No, and I definitely think you're right. It's the same reason why some of these projects qualified for Oriole, which is a cut through in the Green Hills area and the Overhill and Castleman, and it seems like everybody kind of has that same cut through issue more than
Yeah.
likely. So we'll take a look at that. But what I can tell you is, yeah, this was a different application, the one that you're on the other side of Granny White. It has not qualified just based on the data. The
Sure.
one that qualified was Hillsborough to Hopkins, and then that's why we're looking at extending it. Hopkins, as y'all know, is just sort of it's just an intersection. You don't have to stop on Graybar, and so it sort of would be strange to be driving west on Graybar towards Hillsborough Road, and all of a sudden, you just start hitting some speed cushions at one end of the project. And so, if we can bring that at least back to Belmont, that makes this a little more logical. And I hear what you're saying. It could go from Belmont all the way down to Granny White and beyond, I suppose.
Big a follow-up big picture question is that, and this is maybe more for Graybar than Glen Echo, when you're doing these studies and there are lots of side streets that could become 3 or 4-way intersections with a stop sign, which of course, if folks are following the rules, is the ultimate traffic calming, because people would slow down to 0. Is there a point at which you all say, well, this is a long enough stretch, or the side streets coming in make sense for stop signs to be put in addition to speed cushions, or some combination of that, of those measures?
Yeah. The reason why stop signs are not a tool that we use is, and it also gets to, well, how do you get an always stop where all legs of the intersection have a stop sign? It's kind of one and the same. There's some federal guidance that all municipalities, whether it's state, local, whoever, have to abide by. And so and that manual prescribes, here's what you need to prove to justify that always stop condition. It's the same thing for a traffic signal. You can't just go put them up where you think it would be good. It has to have a study, which means traffic volumes have to meet certain thresholds. And so often the threshold that's used is just much higher than what you see on a lot of these side streets. So Graybar probably has enough traffic to warrant an always stop on its approaches, but the side streets don't. And so even if a new road comes in, it's got to have a fair amount of traffic before you can really justify it. Now, that hadn't always been the case. Some of these things can go in, but there is a commission, a Metro appointed commission called Traffic and Parking Commission, that actually makes the decision, and has the recommendation of the engineering department. So what we do with this program is we just look at the street as it is today, recognizing that at some point any of these streets could become stop controlled, and it might change how we would lay out the traffic cushion, the speed cushions, but it's not here today. And so we lay it out as it is today. The nice thing about the product that we use is it's modular. We put it down today, and if in a month something changes, you can come back out and you can take it back up. You haven't lost anything. It's just a bolt down product. Same thing for paving or anything like that. If work has to happen, these are easy to remove and they're easy to put back. And so that's why we just look at it kind of simplistically as it is today, and then we can work with it in the future if things change.
All right, thanks very much for that clarification. Appreciate it. And there's one more comment in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, so Toby's saying, commenting on the sidewalk condition there on Graybar. I should have looked this up. I know for a while there was some discussion about sidewalks being um, constructed on Graybar in this area. I'm not sure if that's still part of the plan or not. It's certainly not as part of this program. But when we get back together, let me research that, because I know at one time it had been discussed, which is so unusual. You know, I mean, 99 times out of 100, when you come to these public meetings, you know there's not going to be sidewalks built. But this one, it was a discussion at some point. So I'm going to make a note of that. I'll try to get some information to see if that's still in the works or not. Sidewalks are just, I mean, we know everybody wants them, and it would be great. We wish we could do them. They're just so expensive compared to what we do in this program. So it's just a matter of prioritizing those and funding those. Anybody who lives in this section from Hillsborough to Hopkins, who may have been invited and is on the call and wants to comment about extending this project, it's okay if you're not. Okay. Well, I think that's the direction that Metro wanted to move in. So I think what we will do is just resend that out and kind of reconvene about that. For anybody who may be interested, I will. So we went through all of this. And by the way, I mean we had 3 sets of speed cushions identified here in this area. Kind of getting back to the question about, you know, intersections and what if they become stops or whatever. It's a good topic too, because it kind of gets to how we lay these out. We're not going to put speed cushions in intersections. Of course, we're going to keep them as far away from them as we can. We're not going to block people's driveways. We avoid steep hills or sharp curves. I'm not sure I know we don't have any curves. I don't think we have any hills steep enough to limit us on that. But just know that there are some parameters that we have to stay within when we're spotting these out. The one issue here is driveways, actually, especially as you get a little closer to Hillsborough Road. There's several driveways that are really close together. So we do the best we can to lay these out and be effective in trying to do that. Other than that, we try to keep them at an average spacing of somewhere around 400 feet, 300 to 500 feet, something like that. Usually gives us a good slow progression of speeds down the street. So that's one of the main things we're looking at in our design. There is here's a little bit of information about the process. Now, this won't be really applicable to Glen Echo because we're not doing speed cushions. We're not going to move to a ballot, and there'll be very little design. It's pretty much we'll go out and spot. Here's where I think they ought to go. I wish I could give a better time frame on that. I don't know the answer to time frame when it's just radar feedback signs. That could happen very quickly, just depending on Metro does install those themselves, and I don't know right now what their stock is like. If they have some in the warehouse, that could happen pretty quickly because we're not looking for a lot of buy-in from residents on that. It's just not an intrusive type of a tool. Speed cushions, on the other hand, we do ballot those. We know, some people love them, but they're not for everybody. And the best way we know to help the street make that decision as to whether that's something that's welcome on the street or not is to go to an online ballot process. So after we get through with the meeting and we have consensus on the project, we'll do a little more design work and really detail out what I just showed you. It won't be a concept anymore. It'll be actually a set of design plans. We make those available on our website, and then we'll send out ballot cards after that and let people vote as to whether they want to do that project or not. Then after that, it goes into construction, and right now that's about a year-long wait. Unfortunately, it's a big backlog, and getting the material and getting it in the contractor's queue is just taking some time. This is just a snapshot of that ballot card that comes in the mail. It's really easy. You just go online or you can call and give them basic information, who you are, where you live, and if you're for the project or not. That stays open for 6 weeks, and at the end of those 6 weeks, we're looking for 2/3 of the respondents, not everybody that lives on the street, but the respondents, 2/3 in favor, and we'll move ahead with the project if we get that. And then the people we ballot is anybody who owns property that abuts the right of way of the street that we're doing the traffic calming project on. So in this short segment, there weren't a lot of properties, but there are a lot of property owners, because just the way the condos and all fall out, we consider condo owners to all own a piece of the property that does abut the right of way, and so those lead to a little bit bigger balloting efforts. But that's a snapshot of who would be balloted there. If you own more than one property, you just get one vote. We don't ballot businesses or vacant properties, those types of things, just for the owners of the residential property in the area. That's my contact information. I've tried to truncate this meeting a little bit because I feel like it's moving towards we're going to have to get back together again, and don't feel like you need to come again. If you like what you saw, we'll be essentially on Graybar presenting a lengthened version of that next time, where we just go all the way to Belmont, but same idea. It'll almost certainly be a speed cushion based design, but we'll get back to the neighborhood and the councilman and pick another date and get back together one more time. I'm sorry for that. I wish I had noticed that earlier, and we had those applications in sooner, and we could have probably done all this at one time. But in the meantime, for either street, if you think of things or have any more comments or questions, feel free to get in touch. I'm Jeff. I'm the one in green below, but the top email address is the NDOT staff people that work on this program. So feel free to contact them or me or both of us if you have any other questions. And that's the link to the traffic calming webpage. And so a lot of the stuff that I talked about here is there. This meeting will show up there here in a few days. They've got a lot of other resources as well. Anything else before we sign off? We appreciate y'all taking the time to join us tonight. Any final thoughts or comments or questions?
Thanks very much. Appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thank y'all. Hope you have a good rest of the evening, and we'll be in touch soon.